Over the last few decades, lawmakers in the Philippine House of Representatives have filed more than 300 measures calling for charter change, an attempt to amend the economic provisions of the Constitution. And yet, after hundreds of attempts, the core of the document remains locked down and completely untouched. Every country relies on a constitution. It operates as the Master Rulebook. It states exactly who holds power, how that power is divided across the branches of government, and sets strict boundaries on what the state can do to its citizens. Under American rule in 1935, the Philippines drafted its first major Master Rulebook. This system set up an independent judiciary, established a clear Bill of Rights to guarantee basic freedoms, and mandated regular, competitive elections. The 1935 setup had its flaws, but it locked in one strict requirement. A president serves their time, and then they leave. Power had to rotate, and no one was allowed to rule forever. That rotation worked until Ferdinand Marcos took office. He won his first presidential election in 1965 and secured a second term in 1969. Looking at this timeline, you can see the strict mathematical dilemma Marcos faced. The 1935 Constitution explicitly restricted any president to a maximum of 2 four-year terms. According to the law, his time was absolutely up in 1973. Outside the halls of government, the country was boiling over. By the late 1960s, a period of severe social unrest known as the First Quarter Storm saw massive crowds protesting extreme poverty, inequality, and corruption. They demanded a complete overhaul of the political system. Marcos had no intention of stepping down, but simply refusing to leave the palace was legally impossible under the written rules. His term was expiring, and the existing system offered no legal extensions. To maintain his grip on the country, his only option was to completely rewrite the Master Rulebook to serve himself. He found his opening in the public's own demand for reform. Marcos publicly supported calling a constitutional convention, a formal process to review and update the laws. On the surface, it looked like a democratic response to the unrest, but he manipulated the process from the inside. By 1972, a massive bribery scandal broke out inside the convention. Delegates revealed they were being offered money, with some allegations pointing directly to First Lady Imelda Marcos, to draft new provisions that would eliminate the 2-term limit and extend the president's power. At the same time, violence escalated. Following the deadly bombing of an opposition rally at Plaza Miranda in 1971, Marcos suspended the writ of habeas corpus. This gave the state the authority to arrest suspected political enemies and lock them up without immediate trial. On September 21, 1972, Marcos signed Proclamation 1081, placing the entire Philippines under martial law. He completely neutralized Congress, seized major media outlets, and ordered the mass arrests of the political opposition. With his critics jailed or silenced, the new 1973 Constitution was rapidly pushed through. Normal secret ballot elections were scrapped. Instead, the administration used citizens' assemblies, forcing people to vote aloud in public gatherings, while under the shadow of military intimidation. Marcos maintained his authority through a specific legal mechanism called transitory provisions. As this organizational chart shows, because the new parliamentary government wasn't fully formed, Marcos legally retained all of his executive power, while simultaneously absorbing all legislative power, allowing him to pass laws by decree. He had built a system of constitutional authoritarianism. He used the structure of the law to create a legally impenetrable dictatorship, bypassing all checks on his authority to abuse the people. The turning point arrived in August 1983. Opposition Senator Ninoy Aquino returned from exile and was assassinated directly on the tarmac of the Manila airport. The sheer brazenness of the killing shattered the public sphere and catalyzed massive, unified opposition across the country. Bowing to mounting pressure, Marcos called for a snap presidential election in February 1986. Following reports of rampant cheating, key military leaders officially withdrew their support for the regime. Hundreds of thousands of unarmed civilians poured into the streets of Manila. Over 4 days, the EDSA People Power Revolution successfully forced Marcos to flee, leaving the country with a complete constitutional vacuum. Corazon Aquino assumed the presidency with a blank slate. She immediately assembled a commission to draft a new charter. In just 133 days, they wrote a new rulebook based entirely around a single driving ethos: never again. This diagram illustrates the first major firewall they installed. The presidency is strictly limited to a single, non-renewable 6-year term. The rules also cap any martial law declaration at a 60-day limit. This creates a constrained emergency tool immediately subject to review and revocation by Congress and the Supreme Court. They also embedded permanent watchdogs into the state infrastructure. The Commission on Audit tracks government spending, while the Ombudsman is specifically tasked with hunting down executive corruption. Furthermore, the text explicitly permanently institutionalizes civilian supremacy over the military. The 1987 Constitution functions as a trauma-informed defense mechanism. It was specifically engineered to prevent any future leader from hijacking the state. In its primary mission, the 1987 document succeeded. For almost 4 decades, it has successfully prevented the rise of another dictator with concentrated Marcos-level power. But that extreme paranoia came with a cost. The strict rules designed to guard the nation also apply to its economy. Heavy restrictions against foreign ownership and investment have created bottlenecks, making the country inflexible and economically constrained. Lawmakers argue that to compete globally, the Philippines has to update these rigid economic rules and finally address unresolved issues like entrenched political dynasties. Yet every time politicians try to open the rulebook, they face aggressive public resistance. When citizens hear about constitutional amendments, they remember the 1970s. They fear that the proposed fix is actually just another hack in disguise. The Constitution holds the living memory of a nation's trauma. Because of that history, any attempt to change the rules will always force the ultimate question: is this change genuinely for the people, or is it a trick to serve just one person?